I think if you take a look at it, if you look at just hay alone, much less forage production in Texas, it's going to be by far the largest crop. It's going to be much bigger in dollar value in acres than any of the row crops. And a lot like fresh water, it's something that's taken for granted until it comes up short, much like it did this year. And for the other reason is it's one of my favorite things to talk about. I was raised on a operation where we custom baled hay. We still sell a lot of hay when conditions permit, and it's something that I'm very interested in. So what I'd like to do today, or what I've been asked to cover this morning, is talk about a decision support to a little spreadsheet that we have to look at putting a value on hay, and then look at some of the results that Megan talked about earlier with a long-term clipping study that was done up in Karnes and Wilson County to kind of get a look at over different weather conditions and over a longer time period, trends in the production of forage and taking into account the quality of that forage and try to put a price on that. And then take a look at some of the budgeting tools that we have to put an estimate to the cost of producing hay. Hay's very important. Most operations folks can't do without it, but it is very expensive. And if you look at most hay, even at $100 a ton, you know, you're talking something that's going to be running 4 cents a pound to 5 cents a pound and on up. And if you compare that with corn and cottonseed meal, it's, you know, it's approaching about 2/3 of those levels. And then take a look at a study that compares 3 different grazing systems. I know Dr. Foster talked about it earlier. Unfortunately, it's not exactly from this area. It's from up the coast a little bit. But we do have some substitute legumes that might work into a program that might be of benefit to you. And then finally, take a look at a tool that we've got to look at estimating legume establishment costs. And then, of course, if you got any questions, but to kind of start off, what we've got on this chart here is results that are put together or accumulated from a monthly surveys that's done by the National Agricultural Statistics Service on a nationwide basis. Every month they go out and they survey about 7,500 firms in the U.S. and put together estimates for prices paid for particular subcomponents of an index. And what we've got here are the relative numbers for nitrogen, diesel, phosphate and potash, fertilizer, wage rates, supplies and repairs, looking at herbicides and insecticides. And these are based in $1990. So basically what we're looking at here, just take the, let's see if I can do this here. Take this red line here for an example, or something that's close to red there. If I was going to buy 100 pounds of fertilizer, or whatever unit I was looking at, or just say I was going to buy $1 worth, whatever that was back in 1990 to 1992, that amount had now cost me $4. Looking at going back to just 2004, the same quantity here, if I was going to buy $1 worth or $1.50 worth, it's now going to cost me roughly $4 here. So looking at the blue line, which is nitrogen, the green line here, which is phosphate and potash, and kind of this, what color would that be? Chartreuse? Whatever it is. I can't ask Roy, he's colorblind. But anyway, the long and the short of it is that the primary inputs that we're looking at for hay and forage production are increasing a lot faster than the other components and putting over price pressure. I didn't need to tell you all that, but this is the magnitude of the problem that we're dealing with, and we'll kind of try to set the stage for talking about maybe looking at some alternative sources of plant nutrients as we'll go in there. Well, like I said before, we can't do without hay and forage in a livestock producing enterprise. You know, what is either hay in this case or forage for? What is it worth? Well, one way we can try to go about putting a crude estimate on there, and this is a crude tool here, is try to value it on the basis of the crude protein content in that hay or forage and the total digestible nutrients, as Jamie said before, basically an energy measure of that. And what we're doing here is put together a little tool, and anytime you see one of these little red dog ears on any of these, if you want to download this from our website, if you put your cursor over that in the live Excel spreadsheet, you'll get context-sensitive health. It'll tell you the number that we're looking for here. Any of these blue cells are input, which can be changed, but for our purposes here, looking at something that is relatively high in energy like corn, looking at its dry matter content, its crude protein content, its total digestible nutrient content, we're just basically pricing off of this. The number that would be changed most of the time are these two numbers here. And this was done about a month and a half ago. I called the folks up at Lissy and Nichols and Pope and got these numbers. Once again, you can change those to fit your bill in any particular case, but for demonstration purposes today, I think they're probably fairly close. The other set of numbers is, and as was talked about before, is the value that we might be able to get from an analysis of hay. And like I said, at home we sell a lot of hay. We very seldom does anybody ask us what the chemical analysis of hay is. Folks have gotten a little better over time and actually want their bales weighed. And I think that's, from the purchasing side of it, a very good idea. But what we're looking at here is one set of hay that has a 6.4% crude protein content, another set of hay that's 14.2%. On the energy side of it, the base hay there is 56.5 and 58.1. I think you should be able to read it off there. The only difference, these are actual numbers that came from a good friend's meadow up in Calhoun County. The only difference here, same equipment, same fertility program, same everything, is it's the difference between the first and second cut in the hay. And that's it. That's the only difference between those two. Well, if I was going to price those nutrients, and once again, like I said, this is a crude tool because in economic literature you'll find something called form utility, and it goes into what needs to be considered in putting the value on a particular product. Generally speaking, having corn in a sack or corn in bulk or cottonseed meal in a sack or cottonseed in bulk, if you're just looking at supplementing either protein or energy, those should, in my mind, have a little more form utility than the actual hay, because I can't bust the hay up, right? If I'm trying to get some energy, you know, whatever I throw out there in crude protein, I'm wasting. But, like my Uncle Bud said, all sure signs of rain fail in a drought. Most of your economic rules of thumb will fail in a drought as well. If I was pricing this just off the crude protein and total digestible energy content, this hay here would calculate out to about $133 a ton. Really, the number is not that important, a flat number. But just say that I was going to have to pay $150 a ton to get it. Once again, I'm going to turn around and do this, and I know the folks on TV can't see, but this number here is basically whatever you're comparing against here on the base hay. Can we make a market adjustment? Well, so what? If I needed these nutrients, if I truly needed that 14.2%, 58.1%, this hay here is roughly, just looking at it, is worth $57 a ton more if I needed it. Now, we got the other big issue when we're talking about purchasing rolls of hay, and that's how much they weigh. A lot of times I'll get this question. Like I said, I was raised on an operation where we put up a lot of hay, we still put up a lot of hay, we sell hay, and folks get real excited, and they'll act excited, and they'll tell me, you know, that I paid X amount per roll for some hay. And I know when they tell me that, my eyes glaze over, and the next thing out of my mouth is probably going to have about as much value as a comment that a seagull could make after looking at the space shuttle. I just don't know what to tell you, because I don't know what the bale weighed, number one. I probably don't know what type of hay they got, number two, and I sure don't know what the quality of it is, number three. So once again, while this is a crude tool, I think if you're going to buy a fair amount of hay, And you did have an alternative, and I realize that folks in a lot of cases don't have alternatives, particularly in dry weather, that this would sure be worth looking at. But long story short, bales that were probably in the same storage area or same barn would be worth somewhere in the neighborhood of $55 different if I needed that free protein. There's that much variability in hay is what I'd like to leave you with today. And if you're going to have to buy very much of it, I'd sure have the bales weighed, and I would, you know, as Megan and Dr. Foster was talking about earlier, it sure wouldn't hurt to pull a sample on it. You take questions during the deal here. Once again, that's available free of charge on the website. You can download it. If you have any trouble with it, please let us know. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
One question. Okay, you were showing here the cottonseed meal.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, how much protein would a cow get out of the cottonseed versus the cottonseed meal?
Okay.
Here, read the question.
The question was the difference between in crude protein composition between whole cottonseed and cottonseed meal.
Right.
I don't have my NRC book with me, but it's about 29%, I think. I think it's about 15%. Whole cottonseed does a lot for you. It's a really good feed, and I don't have it up here, but it's got, you know, it's high in energy and it's high in crude protein. But I'm getting in over my head here real quick because I don't have my book with me.
Okay, I had bought 7 tons of it.
Yes, ma'am. That's a very good feed.
I was wondering if it's good or if it's better to buy the cottonseed meal.
Depends on what you pay for it. And I'm not. Oh, the question was that there was a crude. There was whole cottonseed meal. No, whole cottonseed, and which one would be better?
Yeah.
It depends on your situation and what you had to pay for. I'm not trying to be a wise guy here, but I would say that from what I've looked at here, and depending on the shape that your cows are in, the whole cottonseed is not a bad choice. And in normal situations where the whole cottonseed's, you know, back down, it's a good feed. It's a very good feed.
All right, but I pay $225 a ton, so I didn't know, you know, to go into
Once again, I don't have enough information to know to what shape your cattle were in, to, you know, whether they needed to be on an ascending plane of nutrition or what. But yeah, it's a very good feed.
All right, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Megan before showed some pictures from this study, and it was done up in Karnes and Wilson County. Started in March of 2009, just you know, where we were still pretty dry there, and got drier, and then the data that I have goes through November of 2011, and what we were setting out to do here was to look at trends in both the quality of the forage that was available in a pasture and not necessarily the regrowth from it. So we're basically taking a snapshot. These things aren't being clipped in the same place, and I'd like to make that clear because it may be a little bit misleading there. And how much forage was actually being produced under grazing conditions. These patches were being lightly grazed. And the other two things that I like a lot about this study was that the clipping height was set at roughly a mowing height. So when I go to put a value on it, you can kind of see that this might be, at any one point in time, how much you could have hated if need be. It would have been difficult, of course, on the native site. And then we also air dried it. So looking at that, it's getting you back to a point where if you're taking that little tool that we looked at before, being able to put a value on this. So what we got going on here is on a coastal Bermuda patch. And we're starting here in March of 2009, and our blue line is the production in pounds per acre, and it's going to be read off this right-hand axis. And this kind of green line we got here is the total digestible nutrients. It's in a percentage, and it's read off this left-hand axis. So as you see seasonally, we get some pretty big fluctuations in energy content. And the red line down here is our crude protein. And once again, you know, being on a smaller scale here, we get some pretty large fluctuations over the cycle, over the annual cycle in the quality as relates to crude protein. And like we said, going from 2009 to 2011, we got 3 very different production years. You know, we started off 2009 really dry. This is not normal here for a patch necessarily to drop off this much between spring and in the summer when you're looking at Bermuda. Nor do you usually get this big bump in the fall when the rain started coming and it stayed kind of warm. So that, I think, has some value here to kind of folks that say, yeah, this is kind of a risky deal. This would be pretty indicative of what you see in a kind of quote-unquote good year. Hangs up there in the summer, goes all the way into, you know, you get that one drop-off in August when it turns off real hot, and then, you know, it comes back a little bit in the fall. And, of course, this is 2011 here when pretty much nothing's happening. Well, kind of so what? Once again, the value of the forage out there, and we talked about it before when we were addressing the hay question, was that there's a lot of variation in this. You know, we're going from $50 to $350 an acre in value of that standing crop there as we go through the year. This would be the Klein grass that picture that Megan showed before. Same sort of deal, pretty much when we look at what's happening annually here. Go up during 2010 when we had, you know, basically a pretty decent rainfall year. Production off the Klein grass was higher than what we had on the Bermuda, but in the drought it helped us some, but not a lot. Pretty much same sort of difference, same sort of thing here where we're trying to put a value on those nutrients that were out there in any one month, but the drought. And then looking at the big contrast here, of course, is the native grass pasture. The highs relative to production, you know, aren't as high, not quite half. A little bit more consistent as you go through the summer. We got a little bit higher peak relative to the fall peak in 2009 with the spring high there, but still got the drop off. But all in all, looking at it, you could see why your native pastures are going to lease for considerably less. There's just not as much nutrients out there to lease, and that's not surprising. Moving on to another tool that we got here is we're trying to approach it from the cost of production side here and make kind of show what we have available here for decision support tools if you're looking at producing hay on your particular place. This actual example here is with owned equipment. The prices I got were about the same, were put together about the same time, about a month and a half ago. Looking at fertilizer, the insecticides, basically what's happening here is that there's, in this particular deal, anything in blue is something that you can overwrite and put in. Basically what's happening down here is we're summing up the amount of money that we've got here and taking it over a 100-day period to put in an interest charge. And these budgets are put together in a residual return format where we look at all our sources of revenue up at the top and then start partitioning out expenses. We start with our direct expenses first, money that's considered primarily variable costs, money that we're going to have to come up with immediately to undertake this enterprise. So if our returns above our direct expenses here on this line are negative, there's no point in doing it. We need to stop right there. If this number down here, after we take out what we're loosely going to call depreciation here on our equipment and our land charge, if it's negative, well, we can go ahead and do it. It's just not returning all the charges that we would like to make back to the land and capital in our operation here. Like I said before, these numbers here, the way we put them in are not exactly straight line depreciation, but they're capital recovery factors. We're going to charge a little bit more than straight line depreciation in these particular budgets to replace our equipment. Well, say so what? If I had my hay wrap, my labor, repairs and maintenance on the tractors, my fuel bill, and my capital recovery factors there, given this scenario, I'm roughly just a little bit over $20 a roll. And that's kind of the low end of a custom rate. We can do it a little bit cheaper than that at home, but we do a lot of it. Once again, depending on your patch and everything. So these numbers I don't think are way off. But once again, the good thing about these is they can be changed to fit your particular operation and analyze other scenarios. The fertilizer deal, once again, that's something that a person will want to take a look at. And here, basically what I had was 90 units of nitrogen, 25 units of phosphate, 25 units of potash. Whatever the soil test says on your places should override that. But this is where we kind of get in on the, the discussion of what a bale weighs. You know, if I was looking at those 1,400 pound or 1,460 pound bales before, now I'm a little bit not light on my nitrogen, probably. Because by and large, Jamie, I'm going to need about 55 pounds of nitrogen, right? If it's a Bermuda grass patch per ton of, hey, if I'm down at the lower end, you know, those 1,300 pound bales, I'm on the low end. But that's easily changed anywhere in here. So, given this, you know, if this is my operation, I'm at 60 bucks a roll, more or less. You know, if I could get them same quality cheaper than that, be advised to do that. Well, what if I got another source of plant nutrition? This is, once again, it's kind of done up 37 here a little bit, where they got access to chicken litter, and I was asked to put one of these together. If I replace some of those plant nutrients here with chicken litter, I pick up some more expenses on the custom side of it with my spreading. But my fertility costs drop substantially. And long story short here, I could knock about 20 bucks off that, or get back to about $160 and divide that by 3. So, you know, I'm more or less at $54 a roll now. And that's where these little tools come in handy, is that the person can go in there, set up a scenario that's particular to their situation, and take a look to see if the cost savings that we're talking about here are significant. Well, to kind of wrap this thing up, I'd like to talk a little bit about different grazing systems and the economic analysis of them. And once again, this is the best example I've got. It was done up the coast in Brazoria County on the old Angleton station, so it's not necessarily directly translatable to this area, but there are other lagoons that are available that can work into the different grazing systems here that might warrant some attention here as we restock. But it was done a while back, like one of the studies Jamie talked about. But the improved pasture that we're going to talk about here was Dallas grass based, and it was planted into a prepared seed bed. And there were 2 split applications of nitrogen, 50 units each, made in April and then in June, and then another application made in August, so a total 150 pounds and 50 pounds of phosphate. At that time, there were Grazon P plus D and 2,4-D were used, and that's going to be the same on both the on all those replications. And they stocked it during the grazing season at a cow and calf per acre. Now, there's a median input pasture system, and the difference here is a clover that's still available is the varieties of Louisiana S1. It was inoculated and planted and incorporated with the Dallas grass originally, and then all that was done there was to supplement with 60 pounds of phosphate per acre, and it was stocked at a lighter rate, paired at 1.5 acres, and then because of the potential for bloat there, blocks were made available. And then they kind of had a native pasture up there. And basically, it was common Bermuda grass and Dallas grass. It was originally an improved pasture that had kind of gone to pot, and then basically no inputs were put on it, and that was stocked at about a 1-to-3 rate. Well, over 4 years, the average forage production here, as you can see here, particularly on the back end of the winter or the front end of the grazing season, there's a considerable amount of forage produced, and we've kind of seen some of this up the way. There is some of these annuals, some of the perennials that come on here with the legumes. Roughly 1,200 pounds per acre were produced here in February and March. On the front end, looking at all the 3 years, there were 34 extra grazing days here, 41 there, 32 there, 32 there, and if you averaged it out, there were 35 extra grazing days a year, not to mention the quality, and statistically significantly different. They went into clipping studies, much like Megan was talked about before, and broke them out by component. As you can see here early in the year, even going all the way out through May and June, clover was still making a contribution out there to the quality of the forage. Well, so what? They weighed the cows going on and off the pasture. And as you can see here, over the grazing season, the cows here, their gain was 255 pounds on average. It was statistically significantly different. And the calves, on average, gained 130 pounds more. And on the cost side, of course, we're not kicking in for the 150 pounds of nitrogen that went down in those 3 applications, so we're going to be considerably cheaper there, not quite $80 an acre relative to the high input, and of course not as much as the low input. And we use these on 2009 numbers, so we were using about 5 cents a pound on the hay, and we're pricing the cubes in at $290 a ton. And of course, the shorter feeding period is going to knock about $1 a day off of that figure. So if we look at just the calves, setting the cows aside, knowing that they're going to be in better body condition and working on that, on the cost of putting that weight on the calves, we were about 50 cents a pound better relative to the high input. And like Jamie said before, those have kind of gone the way of the carrier pigeon on this. They're pretty much extinct, looking at putting that much fertilizer on a pasture system, and about 35 cents per pound cheaper on relative to the native. Well, if we were looking at a burr medic, which may be a little bit more applicable to this area, what kind of cost are we talking about? It's not inconsequential. The latest numbers that we run would put it roughly a little bit short of $100 an acre. And there are these legumes do require increased management attention. You're limited to some on the herbicides that you can do, and if you do need to hay them, there's some limitations there. But what we're talking about here roughly is about $6.60 an acre prorated out to get, fairly large possible returns out in the future. Something that I think as we restock and go forward here in the future that might warrant taking a look at if your range of pasture sites, it's feasible to put those kind of systems in. But as we go forward here, I don't think we're going to see a lot of relief. We'll get some temporary relief probably on the purchase feed and fertilizer side of it. There's a chance, if we have a good corn crop in the Midwest this year, corn prices could come down, substantially, but they're probably not going back to where they were pre-2004 to 2000. So I think that makes paying attention to forage and grazing systems even more important for folks in the cow calf business going forward.